over the last decade, Malta has established itself as a financial services centre, and much of this is due to its innovative legislation. One of those pieces of legislation deals with foundations. And here with me today is Dr. Priscilla Mifsud Parker, who is the partner for families and wealth at Chetcuti Cauchi Advocates. Priscilla, thank you for being with us. Perhaps you can start by explaining what a foundation is.
A foundation is a universality of things, which is basically set up by a person who would like to endow the foundation with assets in order for the assets to be protected for beneficiaries, and more often than not for future generations.
We know this in a sort of a charity context. Is there a similarity?
Yes, in fact, traditionally foundations have been very popular in terms of their setup as an organization for voluntary purposes. And that would be a purpose foundation. In Malta, we have the ability of setting up two types of foundations, which is the purpose foundation, which would usually be used for either voluntary organizations or for commercial transactions. And then we have the private foundation, which is used more often in the family context.
In a sense of family planning or tax planning?
Yes, estate planning and asset protection essentially.
Actually, perhaps you could start off by giving us a couple of practical examples on how you would use a foundation.
So one of the situations where we would use a foundation is where the client, the owner of the assets, wants to protect his assets if he is embarking, for example, on a new business venture. A new business venture can present lots of risks, and therefore one of the ways in which one can protect his assets is by entrusting them to an administrator of foundations in order for these to be managed in such a manner where the benefit goes to the beneficiaries which are appointed.
So the sort of ring fence them from his new venture.
Exactly. And this ring fencing also comes from the fact that the foundation has also separate legal personality.
I'm not sure what the implication is of that. How does that help?
Yes, it helps because the foundation of itself can represent itself. It has separate assets to any other institute or even the administrator of the foundations, and therefore the assets are fully protected in this sense.
Does that help with disputes, for example?
Yes, it does. So if there is a dispute between the original owner and, let's say, any creditor, having put the assets before in a separate legal personality, which in this case is the foundation, would protect those assets because now the original owner is no longer the owner, because the foundation have become the owner.
So how does it work in terms of tax? Is it particularly efficient, or does it not have any tax implications at all?
The foundation can elect to be treated as a company or as a trust in terms of tax purposes. So if it elects to be treated as a company, then there are the advantages which would usually attach to a company being set up in Malta. Likewise, if it elects to be set up as a trust, there are the advantages which the trust tax legislation would allow. So in terms of the company, for example, if we are speaking of a person who is setting up a company in Malta for specific purposes, and the income which it is receiving is of an active nature, then we can apply certain refund structures which would allow us to reduce the tax rate quite considerably from that of 35% to 5%. In the case of trusts, we have a transparency model which we would be able to use only in scenarios where the assets are located outside of Malta and where the beneficiaries are essentially non-residents. So the foundation can elect to choose the company tax model or the trust tax model, and there are advantages there.
Now, once you've given all these assets to the foundation and so on, you're obviously entrusting somebody to take decisions on its behalf. Can you explain to me what the components are of setting up a foundation? And obviously, perhaps you can explain to me how a firm like yourselves would actually be able to advise the person setting up this foundation to make sure that they choose the right person, which is crucial, really.
Yes, definitely. Sure. So in the scenario where we have a client who would like to protect his assets, they would basically approach us as administrators of the foundation, and in that scenario we would discuss with them what they would like to set up and what they would like to see in the deed itself. Which powers they would like to reserve for themselves and which powers they will give to the administrators.
So it's quite a flexible arrangement. It can be tailor-made
Yes,
to the
it is.
particular scenario.
Yes. Apart from that, we also give peace of mind to the founder of the foundation, because our law allows us to also appoint a supervisory council or a protector, which is essentially a person or a council which reviews our management of the assets. So if the founder wants, he can also appoint the second layer of protection.
It sounds very complicated, is it? How does one go about setting up a foundation?
It is not very complicated, because we obviously ease the process. We draft all the necessary documentation ourselves, and then we proceed with registration. In terms of timeline, we usually allow 3 weeks for this process to take place, and therefore it is not a very lengthy process.
Explain to me, if you are going to, you're abroad, you're considering setting up a foundation, why would you choose Malta?
Malta has had a very long history of using of foundations, and therefore our laws and even our judicial and court cases and basically the history of it is all there. So if a dispute arises, we have certainty of how we can deal with it in court as well.
Thank you, Priscilla. Well, clearly you can see that it's a very complex situation, and one where your particular needs are very important to communicate to Chetcuti, Cauchi advocates, so that they can give you the best advice on really what needs to be set up. They're at your disposal for any further information. Do make that call. Thank you.